Hi guys, welcome to the new lecture of code practice, and today we will see how to create REST endpoint in Micronaut. So we will be creating a get endpoint and the post endpoint, and we will see how we can set up these endpoints in Micronaut, and we will talk about some annotations. Okay, so let's start, and let me create a new project. We will go on to the Micronaut launch site, right? So from there we will create our own app. It will be a Micronaut application. Version will be 3.0.0. Java version I'm selecting is 8, and the project name I'm selecting REST demo app, right? For build tool we are using Gradle, and for test cases we are considering JUnit, right? So I will create this project and click on download zip, allow. Now this will create this project, and let's see, right? So if we see, this has been downloaded. Now we will unzip this and we will click on build.gradle run. Okay, let's go to the IntelliJ, click on open, downloads, then our project name is REST demo app, and this the build.gradle open as project, right? So you will see it will add it will download the dependencies first, right? And after that our project in instantiation will be completed. Now we can see the project structure, right? It is downloading the dependencies. We can see the project structure, that is main folder is there and the test folder is there. So this is the application class which we need to set up. So I will also tell you like how we can configure the ports in Micronaut. So let's say by default it runs on 8080, but to run on different port we can configure this server and then port, and it is 8082, let's say. So it is micronaut.server.port, right? So this is how we can configure our port number in Dynamo in Micronaut. And let's start our application first. The basic working, if it is working or not. Okay, so as we can see, startup completed. The application is running on 8082, right? So now we will create our controller. Let's name this controller as hello controller, right? And let's annotate this with controller. And now what we will do, we will create our two endpoints. First let me create the get endpoint, right? So to create that, let me say public string and get data, right? Now to annotate this, what we need to do is, this is the get. In Spring we usually have get mapping and the request mapping. Here it's just a simple annotation, that is get, right? So it's a http annotation dot get, right? So to return something value, now we will provide the values here. So if you see this is the values it takes. So usually what we can do is string value, and it starts with this, and let's say ping, right? So this is our URL name which we will be calling while calling this endpoint, this get endpoint. And let's say I want to return home, right? Let's restart this application. So application has been started. Now we will go to the URL. Let's go inside this localhost 8082 and ping. So as we can see, we are retrieving our response that we have just called our API. So our get endpoint is working fine. Now let's say if we want to use any HTTP client in Micronaut, how we can use that. So for that, what we need to do is private HTTP client, which is provided by Micronaut by default, right? And to inject this, to auto add this, we need to use inject, and we need to specify one annotation at the red client, which is basically the client which we are specifying. Now let's say this is my HTTP client. Now I'm making a blocking call, right? And I will make a call to the retrieve method, and I will pass HTTP request dot get, and I will pass my URL, right? So to demonstrate this, let's say I'm calling youtube.com, right? So we will call this API, and if you see this page is combination of HTML, CSS and all the data, right? So what we will do, we will copy this, and now we will paste this into our get URL, right? Now let's catch this, right? So I will run this in debug mode, and I will show you what it looks like. Or maybe what we can do is, instead of this, we can place this, and now we can restart our application. Right, so like it's 8 to 9 seconds it started. Now let's run this application, this endpoint ping, right? So you can see this HTML doc. So it is coming from the YouTube www.youtube.com, and that's how we can call any endpoint using HTTP client, right? Now we will talk about how to create a post endpoint, right, in Micronaut. So for that we need to use this annotation, and let's say we will say is record. We will say we will have a endpoint, and we will say create this record. Now public, let's say I want to return some custom response, HTTP response, and it could be type of a person class, right? So create person, just for the demo purpose, right? And what I will do, return HTTP response dot created, and it will be the body of person type, right? So for that, what we need is, we need to create a person class, right? So what we will do is, we will pass this person object here, person DTO, for the incoming request, and it will accept those parameters. It will deserialize this into the Java object from JSON to Java, right? And we will pass, and we will return the request which we have received with our custom response, right? So what we will do, we will create a 3 fields, JSON ignore properties, ignore true, right? And we will create 3 fields, private int id, private string name, and private final string, let's say age, right? And let's int now final and final, right? Now what we will do is, we will create our constructor. So this constructor has been created, and we will say please use this @JSON creator annotation. So what JSON creator does, it deserializes your object from JSON to Java, so it will map on that particular keys. Now we will use JSON property. So what it says, whatever is coming, like if I'm reading ID from the JSON, then I will map this value onto this ID, right? And @JSON property, and it will be name, and okay, and let's say @JSON property, and it will be age, right? So I'm saying JSON ignore properties. What I will do, I will pass only ID and name from the postman, and it should not break, because what it does, this JSON ignore property, let's say if I'm receiving two properties, but this is my expected, but I have defined a constructor of 3 values, then it should not break, like cannot decel as any object. These kind of exceptions we will not get, right? And now we will define our getters, and to the demonstration purpose we are using toString, right? So now this person has been created. Now what we will do, whatever the person is coming, I need to create one setter, right? Getters and setter. So public void set age, and I will say int age, and this will be equal to this dot age, right? So it must be a final, that's why I can't. Let's do this, right? So now we can set our value to our variable, right? So now we will say person int age, let's say it is 22, and return this person as HTTP response. Now just remember guys, like whenever we define our endpoints, post endpoints, it's a good practice to have this consumes. So media type dot application JSON, and as well as produces, like it will consume a request of JSON type, and it will return a response of JSON type, right? Media type dot application JSON. Now let's start this application again, rerun this application, and we will see what happens, and we will call this a URL. And in the meantime, let me open my Postman. So yeah, as you can see, application hasn't started. So this is the already created URL, and this is the header, and this is the body. So I'm passing ID and name, and let me change this port to 8082, and let me send this request. So as you can see, we received only 2 requests, and we got the successful response. And if you as you know, like for the HTTP response, that is, if it is created, then the return type is always 201, right? Status code. So we have got the 201 response. And so that's it for this video guys. Thank you. I hope you have learned much about like Micronaut, what is Micronaut, and what are the how we can create get endpoint and the post endpoint in the Micronaut, and how we can use HTTP client, and something about JSON as well, right? So this is how we can do our endpoint making in Micronaut. In the upcoming videos guys, you will learn about Micronaut integrations with MongoDB, Redis, and how we can run AWS Lambda using Micronaut, and also how we can configure DynamoDB streams and Micronaut Lambda, and we will see the live example how it will work on the AWS side. So thanks for watching this video guys. See you in the next lecture.